Hello Year 11 and welcome to the night before news in preparation for your second maths paper of the mock series. Just to make sure you're in the right place, this is the foundation video, so if you're in sets 1 and 2, make sure you go on to the higher video. We're going to talk through some of the topics that are likely to come up in this exam. We have a slightly better idea now that we've seen paper 1, and then again just some reminders about how to do your revision and some of the things that are going to be happening the morning of the exam to make sure you're best prepared. So first of all, in terms of discussing what is likely to come up in this exam, it's still quite difficult to predict what questions are going to come up. We've got 2 papers left and they're both calculator papers. There's no rules about what can come up in either paper, so everything that hasn't come up is still fair game. And some of the things that have come up can still come up again, but this is a bit of a summary of some of the things that you've now seen in paper 1. And feel free to pause this to look at it in a bit more detail, but you can see a lot of the topics here. Some of the ones that are likely to come up again, I would say, are solving equations, very likely to come up again, angles questions. You're not going to get stuff on arithmetic really, because you're going to be able to use a calculator in the next paper, but certainly your algebra skills, very likely to come up again. And what else on here? I mean, you had a pressure question, but you'll get more compound measures, I'm fairly sure, and you've had some probability, but again, you will get some more probability. You've also had a decent amount of statistics already, but there will still be more coming up in the next couple of papers. So with that in mind, oh, and percentages is the other one. I can't remember if I said percentages. You'll definitely get more percentages questions. But with that in mind, here are some of the things that I think are going to be in the exam. And just a reminder, it's important that we can't say for certain that some of the things that have come up won't come up again, but we do now have a better idea of some of the things that are likely to come up, some of the really common topics that haven't come up yet. I'm going to do this strand by strand, so starting with number, these are some of the topics that we haven't seen, and I've put them here in order from most likely to come up at the top to least likely to come up at the bottom, and that is based on how often these things have come up in exams over the last few years. So again, feel free at any point as I go through this to pause and have a closer look. But that's number. Probability and statistics, which is one of the smaller strands. There's not a lot here, but some things that are very likely to come up at the top there. And then geometry. Geometry has a lot of content in it, but it isn't the biggest chunk of your exam. It's going to make up somewhere between 15 and 20% overall. But the geometry questions, some of them do tend to be loaded into the calculator papers. So things like trigonometry and Pythagoras are very likely to come up. And some of your angles questions, things like angles and polygons, are more likely to come up in the calculator exams, and we haven't seen it yet. We've then got ratio and proportion, which is quite a big chunk of the exam. There's plenty of opportunity for ratio to come in, more unit conversions, including conversions with time that could be used in speed, distance, time questions. And again, lots there. Again, you can pause and you can have a closer look through if you need to. And algebra, again, huge strand, and lots that could still come up. Sequences, more solving equations, more simplifying. Graphs, I think, you could even get a couple of different graphs questions and more of those basic algebra skills. You see at the bottom there something that hasn't come up, but is at the bottom of this list is y equals mx plus c. It's not a very common skill, so I wouldn't recommend spending a lot of time revising that compared to some of these other things. So in terms of how to revise, just a reminder, because this is very much the same as last time, if you want to look at specific topics, again, that should say Sparks Maths, but you can go onto the independent learning section and you can search for the topics that you want to work on. You've got exam key, where you can search for specific topics. Make sure you change that filter on the left to say foundation. And then when you're searching for topics, don't just look for paper 2 because we're doing paper 2. Search for paper 2 and 3 because they're both calculator exams, and questions that came up in paper 3 in previous years could very well come up in your exam that you've got next as well. There you go. And Maths Genie, just a reminder of Maths Genie, which is a great resource for looking at specific topics. You can go onto here and you can go on the GCSE revision sections and you'll be able to find links to all of the topics that you want to be looking at really. And it might be that you want to focus on some of the grade 4 and 5 topics on there, or it might be that actually you just want to make sure you're really secure on the basics if there are some things in the grades 1, 2 and 3 sections that you're not 100% sure about yet. Or if you want to look at practice papers, then again I would recommend Maths Genie, which we've spoken about before, and you can go on to Maths Genie and look at these 2 links here to Edexcel exam papers. Again, when you're looking at past papers, you can look at paper 2, you can also look at paper 3. There's no reason why a paper 3 won't help you revise for a paper 2. When you do go through past papers, just consider the fact that some of the topics that you're looking at in those will be things that came up in paper 1, and therefore they'll be less likely to come up again. So you might not want to do whole papers, you might want to skip over some bits, but do really focus on the things that haven't come up yet, because they're more likely now to come up in your next exam. And again, final reminders about tomorrow morning. The hub will be open from 7. It was great to see people in there for the first exam, so do feel free to come in and access some of the revision that's been put on for you. Bring questions along that you haven't been able to answer, that you've got stuck on in your revision. You will have the opportunity to do your final revision in the conservatory in the canteen, looking at these grids that we had for paper 1. Lots of people asking really great questions when we went through the first exam, so please do continue to do that. If there are things in there that you're not sure about, that is your final opportunity just to get some input that means you can access it in your exam. And line up will be at 8:25 before we head over to the venue. So once again, best of luck for the exam tomorrow. I gave you some quick tips at the end of the last video, so just to remind you, do attempt all of the questions, make sure you check for sensible answers and use your time really effectively. The only other thing that we said was to just read the last lines of questions before you move on to the next one. Having done some marking now of paper 1, there are some mistakes that students have made that would have been avoidable if we've read questions more carefully. So something that some of you might need to focus on as you go into this paper. But best of luck.